Back on episode 100, two Michigan dairy producers, Tommy Oesch from Swiss Lane Farms and Clare Alderink, manager at Ryzebol Dairy, talked about doing hard things like running 4 miles every 4 hours for 48 hours, the 75 Hard Challenge, and if you recall, Clare also mentioned he was training for an upcoming marathon. Well, I caught up with Clare just days after he crossed the finish line of the Kalamazoo Marathon, running 26.2 miles in 3 hours and 33 minutes. That's roughly an entire hour faster than the average marathon finish time. And this dairy manager turned marathon runner is back today on the Uplevel Dairy Podcast. This is the podcast for dairy farm owners, managers, and advisors who are committed to profitability, sustainability, and excellence. I'm your host, Peggy Coffeen, and it's my mission to bring you the conversations that will uplevel your skill set and your mindset so you can be a top performer in the dairy farming business. And if you love the Uplevel Dairy Podcast, if this podcast is bringing value to you, I have a quick favor to ask. If you just take a moment and make sure that you are following Uplevel Dairy Podcast on Apple or Spotify or subscribing to our YouTube channel, that will go a long way in helping make sure that I can keep providing this service to you. And if you have an extra minute, please go ahead and leave a rating and a review and tell me how much you're enjoying Uplevel Dairy Podcast. So getting back to Clare, well, when I first asked him how his race went, his simple response was this: it was hard. But Clare had been training for months to not only condition his body with the miles, but as you're going to find out, more importantly, to strengthen his mind. And that is what got him through an unexpected challenge and brought him all the way to the finish line. Keep on listening to hear about Clare's race day experience, how he views running in much the same way he views managing the dairy, from developing discipline and consistency to defining which data points really improve performance and practicing patience for the long run. No pun intended. Well, I hope you enjoy catching up with Clare as much as I did to hear about his incredible marathon finish in Kalamazoo. Welcome back to the Uplevel Dairy Podcast, Clare.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
And Clare, for those of our listeners that might have missed you back on episode 100, just give us a quick introduction of who you are and what you do.
I'm Clare Alderink. I manage a dairy in Bailey, Michigan, Ryzebol Dairy. I grew up the son of a dairy manager here in Michigan, about 60 miles from where I'm at now, and always worked on the farm, enjoyed it, liked being around the cows, went to Michigan State for the dairy management, and then worked in the industry a little bit, worked for some really good dairies, spent a little time in sales, and then eventually made my way back here to Ryzebol Dairy to be their manager and work with Ryan and Marika every day. And we got 3,000 cows here in West Michigan, and we really have a really great team, and we focus a lot on our milk quality, and we have a lot of fun, and we're raising our families, and just really, really blessed to be able to do all this. And I made friends with Tom Oesch along through my career before this, and him and I, we push each other, and we do a lot of different things. And now that we both, he's running a dairy, I'm running a dairy, we compare notes with other guys too. But yeah, and Tom and I got into some different things and started doing this 75 hard challenge, and then it turned into running a lot. And then I had some goals, he had some goals. We worked on that, and then that's how I ended up here on the podcast talking about it.
So you're a dairy manager. Like, that's more than a full-time job. And you're a dad, and you're doing important things, but yet you prioritize and find this time. You don't find the time, you make the time. And you have the discipline to hold it in your schedule, to do the things that you know are necessary to get where you want to be in your goals for your marathon. And so that led you across the finish line just last week in Kalamazoo, and at a 3:33. And remind me again, that pace was an average pace of
8:08.
At 8:08 average pace, a finish time of 3:33. And for those that aren't avid marathon runners and fans, like, that might not mean much too. What's the average marathon finish time for, I think for a male, it's like 4 hours, right? Is that about right?
4:20 something. 4:23, I think.
You are well above average. And your goals are to continue to be that. And you've got the big goal of having a Boston qualifying time in the next year, a couple of years here.
3 years, maybe. I don't know. As soon as I can, I'll just keep going until I can, right? Well, I can as soon as I've done the work to earn it, I guess.
So, okay. So I have to ask you this. This is like a kind of a runner to runner question. So being a dairy manager, but you've also picked up, like you said, running in the last few years. And so now you just completed a marathon. For those that aren't marathon runners, that's 26.2 miles of running with your feet and legs with no one chasing you. That's what a marathon is. So just take us back a moment and tell us a story of how a guy that wasn't a runner in a couple of years' time just completed his second marathon. What's the backstory?
I started running in COVID because it was really boring times and there was nothing to do. So I started running on a treadmill. And through the dairy, I met this man named Gary Haga. He's a running coach and an excellent runner. And he also ran the race on Saturday, and he won his age group, and the 2 age groups in front of his age group, he would have won them as well. So, I mean, he's just a really elite, awesome runner and a great running coach. So shout out to Gary Haga. I met Gary, and then Gary's like, well, hey, if you like running, I can teach you how to do it the right way. Because I always just got on the treadmill, or I went out and ran as fast as I could for as long as I could and thought, that's pretty good. Someday I'm never going to do anything anyways. I'm just running to stay in shape, to try to be disciplined and lead a disciplined life, try to do some physical activity in some manner, right? So Gary started sending me plans, and at first it was pretty crazy, like, hey, run an hour. Like, I've never ran an hour. I'm not going to, and then you run an hour, and you run an hour and 15 minutes, and you start doing these runs, and then it turns into not running just as far as you can, as fast as you can, actually running slower and just paying attention to all sorts of different things, your heart rate and stuff like that. And then that actually starts to make it like enjoyable, like where you want to go run and you want to kind of see what you got and what you've done. And for me, that was pretty cool for the first year. There's a lot of first accomplishments, just running distances I never had and never thought I would for whatever reason. And you just kind of, for me anyways, that motivated me to keep doing it, just to kind of see what's here. And then I signed up for a race that got canceled because of COVID, and I thought, I can run a marathon because I've trained as much as I've ever been in my life. This is a good idea. So I signed up, and I was dumb enough to go do it. And it went really poorly, and I cramped up, and I realized, you run a lot of training, and you do a lot of 15-mile runs, and sometimes you do 20-mile runs. But it really gets real after 20 miles. When people say that the race starts at 19, they're not joking. And it's not even really the physical part at that point, because if that's all, it gets really difficult. And I wasn't ready. I wasn't physically ready. I wasn't mentally ready. I wasn't ready for any of it. So I walked a lot, and I took a lot of time, and I felt like I had failed to accomplish what I was trying to do. And I was a little bit embarrassed by it, honestly. But don't be ashamed. Only 1% of the population does a marathon, whatever. Well, I thought I would dedicate a lot of time, and I thought I could put a better result down. But I kind of backed away from going to be Mr. Marathon runner after that. And I kept running, and we do a race here and there just to kind of see, because I still enjoy running. I enjoy the time alone with my thoughts. I enjoy the time to just I do it in the morning before I go to work. I can unwind before I get there. And I think that's a good thing for me to do. And if I'm going to do it, I might as well do it for something. So I had a friend mention that he was going to do Grand Rapids in the fall. So I decided I'm going to just do Grand Rapids in the fall, just to kind of keep me on track, keep me doing something throughout the summer. So I went ahead and did that a little better, and then that led into this year, 75 hard again in January, Kalamazoo race. I've kind of decided, okay, my goals are different now. It's not to complete a marathon. It's not to get it in 4 hours. It's way higher than that, and it's crazier than that. But if I can continue to make progress in time, I will be able to accomplish it. But it's just going to be hard, which is good. So that's kind of where we're at now. Started out as just, hey, I got to have something to do to kill some time during COVID. Turned into part of my routine, a habit, right? 66 days, develop a habit. Do anything for 66 days, you'll want to do it on day 67, right? So just kept doing it and wanting to do it. And then it, just kind of turned into this thing that here I am on a podcast talking about running now. Imagine that. I wouldn't have thought that. I would have never even imagined a half marathon on my radar, 5 years ago. If you would ask me that, I would have said, no way, why? What's the point?
You mentioned that when it has come to running and training and really looking at what you're doing on an analytical level. So it's kind of like, again, like you're talking about, you're doing the training, you're putting in the work, but also learning. And is it that much different than managing the dairy in some regards? I mean, you use a lot of data and analytics in your management too, right?
Absolutely. And I did a 10K with friend of mine, Aaron Gasper, a really good dairyman, the guy that did the 4x4 by 48 with us. We did a 10K. So you check your 10K time and it tells you what your marathon time should be based on that. You do a 5K time trial, do the same sort of stuff like that. VO2 max, Tom and I look at that all the time, comparing that, trying to, that's your body's ability to basically transport oxygen. So the higher, the better. The really elite runners are very high. So we just try to improve that. I don't know if any of that stuff matters. And I try not to share all that stuff with everybody else because it's certainly what my heart rate is doesn't matter to you or to anybody else, and it shouldn't. But they're just metrics that I use, that I look at. How does it all look on the data, and how does it feel? I do the same thing at the dairy. How does it look when I'm out in the barn? How do things feel? What do I see? And then go look at the data and make sure that that's telling me the same thing that I think I'm seeing. And sometimes it's not. That's why we track the data, because feel and what's actually happening, sometimes our correlation does not equal causation, right? So at the dairy, and that's not what's really happening. The same thing can happen in running training too, is sometimes you think, well, this is really improving. I'm just going to run fast for a while. Well, it doesn't make your VO2 go up, so you're not improving your body's ability, even though you might feel better because your average pace has gone down for the month, if that's what you're really worried about. So, I mean, that's, I guess, a good example. It depends on what your goals are and what you're focused on. And I do use the data at the dairy the same way I try to use this stuff for my running, to, I guess, just to help determine what I think I'm seeing and feeling is true, right? To try to add more to the story. But I trust numbers and I like data, and I think we have to have it because you can't just go all by feel, because that's why the technology exists. We need it. We need it to help us. Well, I guess we don't need it, but it makes things easier. It makes it more useful. There's tons of people that have run way better than I ever will with nothing to monitor their heart rate. So I'm not saying that it can't be done without it, but I guess you can be more effective with it.
Yeah, it arms you with some knowledge and some power through that.
You always got to be willing to reflect on all the things and, look for areas where you can improve, right? And not expect things too fast either. It takes a long time to master a craft, and the dairy is a very good example. I've been doing this pretty much my whole entire professional life, and I'm not a master of this craft by any means. There's some things that we do well, and I have an excellent team, and I'm on a dairy that is a very good dairy. But every single day we've got to go out there and we've got to get better. And for me, I see it, like we look at more. I'm more critical of our system than anybody is of our system. You could come through and do a walkthrough or a tour and, wow, everything looks great. Yeah, and I can see some things that, need to be improved. But it's how you channel that thought and how you want to do it. You don't want to look at it in a negative light, but I've got a long ways to go in my career and in running training or in being a father or all of those things, right? I haven't accomplished anything yet. So it's time to, I just got to stay focused on that. And that's how I approach the running thing. That's how I try to approach my job and my, position here every day. It's just, well, where can we get a little better? But don't look at everything as being bad either. I don't look at that and go, okay, well, this just isn't improving. And sometimes it just takes a long time, and you get on plateaus in all facets of life. Things, you have to spend a lot of time getting very little results, and then you'll have a major improvement, right? It's the same deal with dairy. Dairy takes a long time. I mean, we make a decision about these cows. If I want to change my breeding today, it's 1,000 days before I see the results of that, because I've got to wait for that cow to have the calf. I've got to raise her for 2 years. I've got to milk her for 300 days. And then I find out, was that a good idea? So it takes a long time. And dairy prepares us all for that, right? The results are not immediate. They're almost never immediate. So you got to have faith that what you're doing is hopefully going the right way, and be okay when sometimes it's not, and realize that everybody makes mistakes and just correct and move on.
Yeah, it's the long game, right? Or should we call it's the long run, no pun intended. Right? So so think about that for a moment. It arms you with some knowledge and some power through that. And you mentioned that data is helpful in being able to reach some of those goals. And so for you, for this most recent race, what were your goals and how do you choose to set them?
I guess every one I've done consecutive has been better and just be better. And my goal was 3 hours and 30 minutes. I didn't accomplish my goal this time on time. But after the experience, I don't have any shame about what happened on Sunday. I had everything I had was out there in Kalamazoo. Tom and I did a lot of crazy running here this last few months. I was a little dinged up in my training. I'm not here to make excuses. When it came time to start building speed, I backed away and I didn't accomplish my training the way I should have, because I was trying to conserve myself to try to be less sore on race day. But I had enough, and I showed up and I gave it everything I had. Really mental preparation was the key to this race here, because I knew I wasn't going to be 100% physically, and I knew I wasn't going to run a Boston Marathon qualifier, but I really wanted to make sure I was going to be faster than my last one, because I would feel like a little bit of a wasted 6-month cycle if you go backwards. But those things will happen eventually. The way the race went, I felt like I was running it the way I wanted to, and just had there was a very, I don't know, decent period of time, I'd say after 18, where I was really thinking, I want to quit. I want to be done with this. What am I doing here? This isn't. But you just keep your feet moving and you start thinking about the next half mile. That's what Gary told me. I just need you to go out and run the next half mile. Do that 53 times and the race is over, right? That was fun at mile 9. Next half mile, I'm getting a little quicker. This is all good. And then that course, we got out and we were alone, and it felt like you were running by yourself for a couple hours. I discovered this, I guess, when we came back into town and we merged with the half marathon and the 10Kers. I like to be with the other people when I'm running a race. And I didn't think that. I've said a lot. I like to run alone. And I don't want to talk with anybody. I don't want to but it's nice to have the other people there to motivate you and to have the people around and actually, see the things moving when you get to that point. So it got really tough at the end of this race. My watch died at 20.75. So I get really reliant on that stuff if you train with it every single day.
Your watch died. And now, to a normal person that isn't into this stuff, that might not mean much. But as a runner, I know, and I can tell this too, is that you cling to as it's almost like a comfort factor and a motivational factor and part of the mind game. And your watch is one of those things. For me, it's looking at what's my pace at, where am I at in the race? And so you ended up losing this comfort piece. At least that's what it would have been for me, was a comfort piece, maybe for you too. But this piece of consistency in your training that you relied on, that probably brought some sense of you being able to keep a pulse on what was going on and how close you were to reaching your goals. And when this went out was exactly at the point that you just talked about, when the hardest part of the race comes up, when you're beat up, your body is tired. There's, what do they say? It's a 20-mile run and a 6-mile race, right? Or 20-mile warm up and a 6-mile race. And so there could not have been a more challenging time in a marathon for a runner to lose their connection to something that has been with you as part of your training since the very beginning. And so you talked about this mental prep and how that got you through doing these hard things. And so you mentioned this book, A Confident Mind. What else did you have to dig into when you are basically without having any idea where you are in your mileage and how much is left of the race? No speedometer.
Driving in your car and all your instruments are gone. You're driving in the car. For example, for somebody that doesn't use their watch every day, you're driving down the road and everything goes blank. And now you got the car in front of you and the car behind you. But there were no cars around me.
So you were at the most desolate point of this whole course, right? Like there's no one else around hardly at all. You have lost your connection piece to what you've had as a training partner for all of these months and months and months. So like, what was going through your head during that last 6 miles?
There's only an hour left. That's what I kept. We can do this. Every run. I've ran lots and lots of times an hour, almost every day. Okay, well, I can run an hour. That's what I had to keep telling myself. I got another hour left. I can just keep doing this. I'm going to find the people. It's going to get easier when you get around and there's more excitement. And I just got to keep running because it's not going to the only way to get it done is to keep moving faster or as fast as I can. I thought once at one of the water stations, I shuffled my feet a little bit, but I didn't walk because once you stop, and it's over. It's done. You don't start running again. And then the defeat and all the dumb things creep in. But I wasn't ready. I wasn't willing to lose. So I'm just going to keep my feet moving and keep pushing and thinking about, I'm going to get through this. And I don't remember much of it, honestly. That window, there wasn't much going on. I was trying to shuffle around my playlist and figure out where I was going. And there was one other guy that I ran into a little bit before we got into all the people. And I don't know. I guess what that proves, though, is all that I don't need the watch. It doesn't matter. And what was I going to do? Was I going to do some special strategy that I was going to deploy where I was going to start running a minute faster mile? No. I was going to run as hard as I could anyways, whether my watch told me what I was doing or not. So I just decided I'm just going to stick to that. I'm just going to try to, I've run enough of these miles. I should probably know what my pace should feel like anyways, right? So just keep going and it was at the point of the race to conserve anything anyways. So just give it all you got. It's going to last less than an hour. And that's kind of what I stuck to and just kept going and made it just fine.
You felt like you left it all on the course, right? Like you gave it everything. And that was satisfying for you, right? Like that was success.
You got to believe that you're good enough, and whatever you got to be able to go and you give that, and that's what you have. And you have to have total confidence that I've done the work. I have the receipts. I'm here to run this marathon, and I'm going to give it. And you'll often find out you have more than you thought you had, right? But if you're not willing, if you don't believe, if you don't, then there's no way. You're the gatekeeper. You have to have the confident mind is the book, right? So you got to have the confidence. You got to know I'm not thinking about running when it gets to that point, because I've reached a level of confidence with my running that I'm not thinking about that and analyzing that. I'm thinking about just trying to keep things going and keep moving and keep pushing and just stay focused, right? So it really helped a lot, and that I would highly advise to check that out, because it really, the mindset is what matters at mile 19 through the rest. You're physically, everybody's beat up by that point. Everybody's beat up. I mean, even if they're running a lot faster, nobody's running 18 miles and feeling good at mile 19. They're lying to you. If you're racing and you're pushing yourself and you're trying to accomplish that, then you got to find something else to work with for an hour or so, right? And that's what it was like, and that's what we did on Sunday.
That could have been a moment where that one little thing could have really thrown you off from your goal that you've been training months for, just because, like, none of us are at our best when we're exhausted, when we're at our point of, physical and mental stress. And like that's where you're at mile 20, right? Like it's as you said before, that's not the easy stretch is those last 6 miles. And so any little thing that was out of the plan could have thrown you off, but you were able to dig back into all of that mental training. You talked about the Confident Mind book. What are you listening to? Like, what keeps you going?
Tom and I talked about this. Whenever you're doing anything in life, the enemy gets a vote, right? So you can have all the perfect preparation. You can do everything just the way it's supposed to go, and there are still going to be issues and there's still going to be problems. So you just got to keep that in mind and like, okay, well, now I don't have this, but it's a good thing that I did these other 7 or 8 things that I did to prepare for this to make it so if one thing goes wrong, the whole entire strategy doesn't unravel, right? You have to be ready to get punched back always, right? And that's the number one thing you remember, that every plan is perfect until deployment. And then you start to find out that there's an alternative plan that is against that plan. And you've got to try to combat that sometimes. And things are going to go wrong. And how you respond to that is probably more or equally important to how you execute the plan altogether.
And so you were able to respond to the biggest challenge at the most grueling point in this race by keeping going. And when you look back at your data and your analytics, you can kind of figure out what you ended up pacing those last 6 miles at, even if your watch wasn't able to tell you. And so what did that look like? How much did it change from the first 1 through 20 pace to how you finished the last 6?
I think my watch said I was at 8:05 and I finished at 8:08. So my last 6 were probably quite a bit slower, but maybe like 8:15s or something like that. Not like insane slower. The Race Joy app was off by like a half mile. So I hit mile 26 and I could almost still see the 25-mile marker behind me. I was like, this is wrong. Because I thought I was on time for a while, but I started to realize when I saw the 3:30 pace group fade on the horizon, I was not at 3:30, but it was telling me I was at 3:29, 3:28. I was going to get my goal, but I kind of realized that something's amiss. But I finished fine.
Really, in the grand scheme of things, we're talking a change in your pace of maybe 5 seconds a mile. Like, that's quite minimal. And I think that's the thing that I really want to draw out here for you, Claire, in this whole experience was that, like, you were able to keep consistent, but because you had a base of having done the hard things, knowing that you were prepared and having done that mental preparation to help you be able to see that, right? And that's what kept you consistent, even when your dashboard went out. And how much does that speak to other things in life that you experience on the dairy or, other times too, where you're able to just kind of realize that your preparation and doing the hard things along the way had set you up to be able to get through a challenge and come out on a positive note with something that is satisfying and successful on the other side?
That's a good question. That's a lot of question. Just the consistency, just like you said. I mean, we do, and that's what a dairy is. You got to try to do the same stuff over and over and over and over and over again, and you manage the same small issues all the time, and the problems are the same. And like I talk all this about, I got all this running data. Well, I still have things that are wrong that I don't correct. Even if I work on it, I'm not correcting it. So maybe I don't know how yet. There are things in our parlor that I work on with our guys that I have not corrected, that I don't know how yet, but I'm not going to stop trying. You just got to continue to try to do the same things as best you can, and then you can start to measure the things that you find that actually have value. Vertical oscillation doesn't matter in running, but we measure it, right? There's things I don't know, I want to throw out a specific example and make everybody mad in dairy that we measure that don't matter. There are things that we are looking at that aren't important, but it's figuring out what ones for you are the best ones and what you're going to use to guide your vessel, right? What's your compass? What is it going to be, and stick with those things and try to improve them. But it takes consistency and it takes time, and the dairy is very much the same. And the way we milk the cows and the routine and feed the cows, and they don't want anything changed ever, and that's great. So they measure us. They're the ultimate measuring stick. If something changes out there in the barn,
Mm.
it's because of something we did, right? So what did we do? And I really enjoy it. I like to be involved in this industry. I like to be with the people, and the stuff that we get to do every day and working with the animals is truly a blessing. And I don't think people understand how lucky we all are to get to do this. I know there's hard stuff, but everybody's got their own set of problems, and every industry's got their own issues. So I just think the discipline, Jocko Willink, discipline equals freedom. That's true. Do your things that you need to do, even if you don't want to do them, and then it will make it so when things hit the fan, you're ready, and you don't even realize that you're ready. Sometimes we have meetings that there's not a lot of content, but we have the meetings every other week because that's what we do, and we need to do that, and we need to talk about the things, and sometimes things are good, and sometimes there's more opportunity and less, but we're constantly doing it to try to prepare ourselves to be better, how to handle problems, improve the communication. This is a team here. The number one thing in any team, especially when there's multiple parts moving, it doesn't take a lot of communication to run a marathon. You do it by yourself. But to run a team, that's all it takes. That's what it takes all the time, is make sure that the right people are getting the proper message so we can be effective, and they know what they need to do, and they know what the expectations are, and just to know what's going on and feel like they're a part of it and they're included. And I think that all of that matters. And that is, when I first came here to the dairy, I didn't speak very good Spanish, and I felt very handcuffed because I think one of my strengths is my ability to communicate with people and illustrate what I want to accomplish. And I think I can even inspire people a little bit with my communication. That all goes away when you change your language immediately. I can't, but it's 7 years. I conduct all the meetings all in Spanish now with the guys, and I can talk to them, and we can do lots of things that we were incapable of doing, but it's all because of communication. And even amongst our management team, communication. And I'm kind of going off on a tangent here about that. What am I disciplined about? Communicating to my team about being in front of my cows in every single, at least once a week, but I do the vet check, being in front of the cows, going out and seeing what's going on in the barn, making yourself available to the team. I do those things, and then I'm allowed the freedom to go do things that when I'm not around here, I can go run for hours. Or another very passion of mine is fishing on Lake Michigan with my friends in the summertime, and we go, and I really enjoy it. I love Lake Michigan, and I love everything about that. But I can't do any of that stuff if everybody's here not knowing what's going on and what to do, and they're asking all kinds of questions, and I haven't allowed and created an environment where maybe I can be absent from it and it can still operate. But you have to have the discipline to do it because it's easy not to. I don't want to have meetings with the guys most of the time, but I still do it. And you don't want to get up and go running every day, but you do it. And you find yourself, you think, well, why are you just doing stuff you don't want to do all the time? Because once you get it done, you feel a lot better. And you realize, oh, that's why I should have done it. And you don't, I think it's human nature to naturally drift from what you should be doing. So let's try to keep a few things and do them all the time. And it's not going to be perfect. And yeah, that's what works for me. And I'm not saying it's working great, but I mean, whatever I try to do it like as best I can, the most of it, like get really into it and really enjoy it. And then maybe if I find something else that kind of piques my interest, go do that really good for a little while too, right? And just try as many things. And life is about the moments that you create in life. Go make as many of those as you can. The moments are what's important, right?
You know what you want to do to just take the foundation you built and use it to achieve the next big goal. And Clare, thank you for sharing this really inspiring story that's a follow-up to when we last chatted, when you were getting ready and in your prep process. And now we get to hear how it all came through full circle and how you were able to really just do hard things, which is what we talked about last time. But this is the example of not just saying it and not just talking the talk, but actually doing the thing. And that in and of itself is totally inspirational, and so appreciate you sharing that with us today here on the Uplevel Dairy Podcast. I hope you enjoyed listening to Clare as much as I did today. And this conversation, well, it was about marathon training and running. There's so much more to that, so much more depth and so much more value to ideas like discipline and freedom and mindset. And that book that Claire mentioned, A Confident Mind, that one is on my listening list as I start my own marathon training in the next month. Well, thank you for listening to the Uplevel Dairy Podcast. I'm Peggy Coffeen, and if you aren't already on our Uplevel Dairy email list, make sure you head over to upleveldairy.com and join the Uplevel Dairy community. That's how you can make sure that you get an announcement of every new episode right in your inbox.